Welcome back, honors. All right, so we got into class talking about family and why family shouldn't marry their family. So of course we got the Carlos of Spain, right? Talking about him and how. Now, anyway, but let's go ahead and continue forward. And so we talked about Charles V in class today more than anything else. Kind of the leading example of absolutism and kind of the pressure that these people were under, and getting into the idea of like single leaders ruling over entire giant swaths of land, right? So you would consider Charles V to be like the first true attempt at absolutism, but then his son, who comes up next, is going to be the first like absolutist of Spain, right? So Philip II is the guy we're getting into now. Wait, no, yes, no, yes, yes. Philip II is the guy we're getting into now, right? So Philip II is a very intense figure. He is the guy that is pretty much around when Spain's power begins to fall, all right? So during the turn of the century, around coming off of the 1492 expedition of Columbus, discovering North and South America, and going into his reign, which was, I believe, starting in the 1520s. Let me double check that just to be safe. Philip I. He's born 1527, and he was the... Wow, really? We're just not going to give me the years that he was in power? Can't we just do that? Oh, good gosh. There we go. All right, so King of Spain, 1556. So in the mid-1550s to about 1598, he's going to be the absolutist ruler of Spain, right? So he's the son of Charles V. He, of course, is a Habsburg himself, okay? He's got a little bit of the jaw issue. He is very, very shy, very stoic. Apparently many women found him charming because he was kind of recluse and mysterious, but he's also a ferocious Catholic, much like his father, right? His dad, as we know, retired to a monastery, became obsessed with time, put clocks all over his walls, faked his own funeral. And then he's going to end up taking over Portugal as well. And when he does this in a series of several different attempts on how he was inheriting land in Portugal, he actually takes their trade routes after the line of demarcation. So the line of demarcation kind of fizzles out when he comes to power, right? So he takes over Portugal, and he becomes the richest country and richest ruler in the entire world because he's got gold and silver streaming in from North and South America. He's got Portuguese spices, slaves, and sugar streaming in from, like, Africa. So you're seeing a man like now involved in a country that is completely owned by one figure, and he's the one making all the money. So getting into it, though, what he's going to then do as time goes on, he's got to get married, right? So Philip II decides that he's going to end up getting married, and he gets married, and guess who he marries? You won't believe it if I told you. He marries Bloody Mary, all right? So he married Bloody Mary of England when she was in power, right? So this is after the death of Henry VIII, and after the death of Edward VI, and after the death of Lady Jane Grey, you know, the 9 Days Queen that ended up getting executed. So he marries Bloody Mary, or Mary Tudor, right? But the thing about their marriage is it was an absolute joke, all right? So their marriage was like just basically to try and solidify Catholicism in England to keep the Reformation from taking over in that area, right? So because she was much older than he was, right? And really more of a move, like I said, to grow Catholic power. He actually didn't live in England with her at all. They never had kids. He actually, like, slept around on her all the time, cheated on her constantly. And not to mention the fact that, like, the sad part is, though, is that she was very into him, right? She was like, oh, he's so handsome and stuff like that. And he would always be like, ugh, God, is that my mother or my wife, right? So, and the big thing about it is they tried to have kids multiple times, and unfortunately, it's never going to work out. She even had a phantom pregnancy at one point. Like, Mary believed so intently that she was pregnant that she actually convinced her brain that she was pregnant, even though she actually wasn't. All right, so it's a really, really big problem. But since she's so much older than he is, she is going to die before she does. Or like before he does. So this is them getting married. So Mary ends up dying, okay, of course, during like midway through their marriage, right? He's still pretty young. He's in his 30s. And when they got married, she was flirting with 40 years old. She dies, and he loses control of England, right? So when they got married, he became the King of England, okay? So However, he was the King of England living in Spain. So due to the way that the Parliament had set up the succession of the Tudor family, she technically had more authority in England than he did because the Parliament wanted control of England to stay in English hands, right? So technically he was the King of England, but he only was there kind of as an advisory or just an extension of his rule in Spain, right? Now, who takes over once she dies? None other than her sister, Elizabeth I, the Iron Queen, right? So herself, yet another absolute, well, not an absolutist, but yet another ruling figure that we're going to talk about, right? So he hates Elizabeth, probably because she rejected him, right? He actually tried to turn around and marry her after that. He's like, hey, you want to convert to Catholicism and be my wife? And she was like, ha, 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 ha. No, because she is the Virgin Queen, right? She is apparently never got married. She is, the name Virginia is named after her, right? So because she was like, I am not getting married to you. I am not submitting to your will. I am Elizabeth. I had smallpox. Let's put some makeup on this, right? So now she said no, and this is going to end up leading to a huge event in history known as the Spanish Armada. All right, so here's the thing. Keep in mind that this is the time in history when England did not have the most dominant navy in the seas, right? Everybody always sees it as like, oh, England has always been the giant naval power, right? Well, actually, when Elizabeth came to power, they had not started colonizing different areas yet. The British East India Company was in its fledgling state, hadn't even officially been created yet, right? So England was just an island nation that was able to use its island geography to actually stay safe from the continent of Europe, right? So Philip decides that he's going to try and invade England directly with his humongous naval fleet that he has, known as the Spanish Armada. An armada is a giant group of boats, right? And they had these things called Spanish galleons, right? Which were these huge boats built for carrying trade goods from North and South America, spices from India, but then also being able to wage war if they needed to. So they were racked up with cannons and stuff like that. Now, the English were massively outnumbered by the Spanish, right? The Spanish had over 130 ships to, I think, the England's like 50-something. Let me double check. How many English boats? Spanish Armada. All right, so, but anyway, continuing forward. But the England's going to end up winning, right? So England's going to end up winning, and it's going to be a massively, like, crazy event in history. Because by the numbers, honestly, England should have lost hysterically bad. All right, so Spanish Netherlands, 6 July, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't even say. I tell you what, extra credit to whoever can come in here and tell me first tomorrow when their class starts, so on the way to E period, okay? Whoever can tell me how many boats the English had, I'll give you extra credit, all right? So anyway, now, but we do know that the Spanish had a fleet of over 130 ships. They had over 8,000 soldiers. They were ready to rock and roll, right? So, but England's going to end up winning because they used a little bit of luck, and they used a new strategy adopted by a possible boyfriend of Elizabeth's, Sir Francis Drake, former pirate. All right, so anyway, now, but she called him a privateer because she thought he was awesome. Okay, so now, to summarize this whole thing, the English are going to end up winning because of using this new strategy that Francis Drake came up with called fire ships, right? So they took old ships that weren't serviceable or that you couldn't really like use to fight in or carry goods in, and they set them on fire and launched them directly at the enemy vessels, setting many of them ablaze, right? But they also, now, the fire ships are just really cool. The main reason why England won is because they had a fleet of smaller and faster ships that were able to maneuver around the Spanish ones. They were also able to lure them into shallow water in the English Channel to actually use the advantage of their smaller boats much better, right? Now, Spain, though, is going to end up trying to then go and launch and land around the backside of Ireland, right? They're like, oh, well, look, we lost the early battles in the English Channel, so let's sail all the way around to England and we'll land in Ireland, right? And we'll start in Ireland because Ireland's full of what? Catholics, right? So they were like, we'll go get the Irish Catholics and then we'll go and invade through there. Giant amounts of storms hits, and only one out of every 3 boats actually returned to Spain, right? Womp, womp, wah, 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 wah. And then Spain's power is going to begin to decline after this massive loss to England, right? Even though they're going to enter into a golden age of art and literature, right? So Spain's power under Philip II just ends up hitting the deck, right? So, but we are going to get more into that tomorrow, talking about why exactly that happened and how the Spanish Armada was kind of the tipping point of power in Spain and why you never hear about Spain when you talk about World War II or World War I, all right? So, or other major like interactions between countries in Europe at that point. So I'll talk to you guys about that tomorrow. Hope you all have a great evening. I'll see you then.